Beatrice Hartley was 41, and the last silk she owned had gone onto her niece's shoulders 3 days before the county ball. She spent 3 nights by candle, unpicking a 15-year-old gown, cutting it down to fit a girl of 18. She would go herself in grey wool. She did not complain. Not once. She took the chaperone's bench by the wall. Grey wool and a black ribbon at her throat, and there, within her hearing, before 40 of the county, Mr. Reginald Fanshawe said it plainly. One does not ask grey wool to dance, given away, then mocked for what was left. Then the Duke of Corvenden came in late from the magistrates' bench, still in his travelling clothes. He did not look at her. He looked at her niece's gown. And he asked the hostess a single question about the silk. If you've ever been judged by your dress instead of your heart, this story is for you. Before we go on, do something for me. Subscribe to the channel, and in the comments, tell me one thing. Tell me what city you're watching from tonight. I read every one. Now, let me take you to Dorset. Nether Harding is a small place. It was smaller in 1846. A church, a green, a lane of cottages leaning together against the wind off the chalk, and at the end of that lane stood Rose Cottage, with its low door and its 4 windows and its roof that wanted mending every autumn. Beatrice Hartley kept that cottage. She had kept it 9 years. 9 years since her brother died. Captain Thomas Hartley went down with a fever off the coast of Africa. He left the Navy nothing to bury. He left his sister 3 daughters, £110 a year, and a cottage with his name still on the door. Charlotte was 9 then. Emily was 6. Sophia was barely walking. Beatrice was 32 and unmarried, and she took them without a word of complaint. That was her way. She took things without a word. £110 a year is not poverty. But it is not comfort either. Not for 4. She learned to run the house to the shilling. She learned it the way other women learn embroidery. With patience, and daily, and until her hands did it without thought. She kept a book. Every penny went in that book. Candles, coal, flour, the girls' boots, resold twice before they were replaced. She knew to the farthing what a week of living cost. She knew which market day gave the best price on a joint. She knew how to make a Sunday chicken feed the 4 of them into Wednesday. The neighbours thought her clever. They did not know how tired clever is. To be clever with money every single day, for 9 years, is a kind of work that never lets the shoulders down. She did it, though, and the girls grew up warm, and fed, and mended, and laughing. That was the whole of her ambition. That, and one thing more. She wanted them safely placed. Married well, or at least married kind. Set somewhere the world could not knock them about the way it had knocked her. That was the thing she wanted, under all the other things. And the cottage was still in her name. Though she had trained herself not to think of Michaelmas, I will tell you now what she would not tell herself. There was a debt. £285 owed to the Wessex and Dorset Loan Company. It had come on slowly, a bad roof 1 year, a bad harvest another, the doctor for Sophia's lungs a third. It fell due before the leaves turned. Michaelmas, she kept the figure in a locked drawer of her mind, and she did not open that drawer, because opening it did no good. So, that was Beatrice Hartley. Learn to love her before the story hurts her. That is what I am asking. A tired, careful, upright woman who had given 9 years and asked for nothing back. Then came the ball. The county ball is the great event of the Nether Harding year. It is held at the assembly rooms in the market town, 6 miles off. It is where matches are made, where a girl is presented to the county and looked over and either noticed or not. For a family with daughters and no fortune, it is the one door. The only door. And Charlotte was 18. It was her turn. Charlotte needed a gown. There was no money for a gown. There is never money for a gown when there is a debt due at Michaelmas. Beatrice looked at the book, and the book said no. So she went to her own press, in the small cold room at the top of the stairs, and she took out the last good thing she owned. It was a rose silk, a deep, soft rose, the colour of the inside of a shell. She had worn it 15 years before, when she was young, and had prospects, and had danced. It had cost her father a great deal in its day. It was out of fashion now. The cut was old. The waist sat wrong for 1846. But the silk itself was fine, the kind of silk they did not weave the same way anymore, and there was a great deal of it. She could have sold it. She thought about selling it. It would have fetched something toward the debt. Instead, she cut it up. For 3 nights she sat by a single candle to save the second, and she unpicked the whole gown, stitch by stitch, and she cut it down, and she made it new. She turned 15 years out of fashion into something a girl of 18 could wear and be proud. She took in the shoulders. She raised the waist to where the young women wore it now. She trimmed the old fullness away and made the skirt fall clean and modern. Her eyes ached. Her fingers cramped. She did not stop. When it was done, it did not look like an old woman's gown made over. It looked like a young woman's gown. That was the skill of it. You would never have known. Unless you knew silk. Unless you knew, at a glance, that they had stopped weaving that particular weight of rose after the Spitalfields trade collapsed, 20 years gone. Then you might have looked closer and wondered. But who at a county ball knows silk like that? Nobody, or so she thought. And for herself, Beatrice took out her grey wool. A day dress. A good, plain, respectable grey wool day dress, the kind a woman wears to church or to market. Not a ball gown. Not anything like a ball gown. She had no ball gown left to wear, because the last one was now on Charlotte. At the throat she pinned a black ribbon. It had been her brother's mourning ribbon, kept from his memorial 9 years before. She wore it always at anything that mattered. It was Thomas, come with her. It was the reason she was doing any of this at all. Charlotte, when she saw herself in the glass, cried a little. She thought the gown was bought. She was 18. She did not yet understand what it had cost. She would understand later. That is part of this story too. They drove the 6 miles in a hired trap. Charlotte in rose silk, glowing, Emily and Sophia, too young to dance but old enough to watch, and Beatrice in grey wool, with the black ribbon at her throat, holding the whole nervous cargo of her family's future on her lap like a basket of eggs. Let me tell you how a county ball works. Because it matters. There is a floor for dancing. There are chairs along the walls, and where you sit tells the whole room who you are. The young women who might be asked to dance sit forward, near the floor, where they can be seen. Their mothers and their chaperones sit back, against the wall. Once a woman is on the chaperone's bench, she is out of the running. She is furniture. She is there to watch other women be chosen. Nobody asks the wall to dance. Beatrice took the chaperone's bench without being told. In grey wool, she belonged there. Grey wool had already answered the question before the question was asked. She was not a woman who might be chosen. She was the aunt. She sat with the mothers, and she watched Charlotte step out into the light, and she felt. Under the tiredness, one clean, bright thread of hope. It began well. 2 young men asked the nieces. A curate's son asked Charlotte, and then a young Mr. Ashby with a good farm asked Emily to stand up for a country dance, though she was young for it. Beatrice watched, and her heart moved. This was the whole point. This was why the silk had been cut up. It was working. And then the other thing happened. Mr. Reginald Fanshawe was a man who read dress the way other men read faces. He knew every family's fortune to the pound. He knew who was rising and who was sinking, and he had a tongue. He was standing near the wall with two younger men who wished to be thought clever, and he looked along the chaperones' bench, and his eye fell on Beatrice. On the grey wool, among the silk and the muslin of the mothers who could still afford to dress. And he said it, not loudly, but not softly either. Loudly enough, within her hearing, within the hearing of 40 people. One does not ask grey wool to dance. The younger men laughed. Because you laugh at what the powerful man says. That is how it works. Beatrice heard it, every word. She did not turn her head. She did not colour, or not so anyone could see. She did not stand up and leave, which is what her whole body wanted to do. She sat and she looked at the floor, at Charlotte, moving through the figures of the dance, rose silk turning under the candles. And she reached up, quite calmly, and she straightened the black ribbon at her throat. That was all. She set her brother right. And she stayed. That is the thing about a woman like Beatrice. She had been mocked before. Not so publicly. But the world had a way of reminding her over the years that she was a poor unmarried aunt in a made-over dress, and she had learned to take the reminder without breaking. She had trained herself. Hope was a thing she kept locked in a drawer next to Michaelmas. She did not let it out. It was safer not to. So she sat, and she was furniture, and she watched her girls dance, and she told herself that was enough. That was all she had come for. That was all she would get. And it was enough. She almost believed it. Now, the evening was well on when the doors opened one more time, and a different kind of quiet came into the room. The Duke of Corvenden had arrived. You must understand what that meant. Julian Hale, Duke of Corvenden, was the great catch of the county. More than that, the great catch of 3 counties, rich, titled, unmarried, and near 44, which made every ambitious mother in the room lean forward at once, because a bachelor Duke of 44 is a bachelor who might, at last, be about to choose. But he was not what they expected that night. He had not dressed for a ball. He came in his travelling clothes, plain and dark and dusty from the road, because he had come straight from the quarter sessions, from the magistrates' bench, where he had spent the whole long day. He was a working magistrate, the Duke. He sat in judgment on poachers and debtors and thieves. He read evidence for a living. He was tired in the way Beatrice was tired, though neither of them knew it yet. Tired down in the bone. He was also, though he hid it well, thoroughly sick of being hunted. Every room he entered, he could feel the mothers turn like weather vanes. He wanted, more than he could have said, to be looked at once by someone who was not counting his acres. He did not expect to find it here. The mothers turned. Miss Cordelia Vane, the great heiress, the match his own mother favoured, straightened in her chair and arranged her face. The whole room bent toward him like grass in wind. He did not look at any of them. He was looking at the dancers, or rather at one dancer. At Charlotte Hartley, in her rose silk, moving through the figures. And his tired eyes narrowed, and something in his face changed. Not the way a man's face changes when he sees a pretty girl. Charlotte was pretty, but that was not it. It was the way a man's face changes when he sees something he was not expecting to see. When a fact does not fit, he watched the silk turn. And he did a small sum in his head that no other man in that room could have done. Then he went to the hostess, Lady Amesbury, and he bent to her, and he asked her one quiet question. He asked her whose work had recut that silk, who in the Hartley family had made that gown over. Lady Amesbury did not know what he meant, exactly, and answered as best she could. And the Duke listened, and nodded, and his eyes went from the girl in rose to the wall, to the chaperone's bench, to a plain woman in grey wool, with a black ribbon at her throat, who was watching the dance and did not know she was watched. And I am going to stop there, at the question. Because the answer to it is the whole story, and you do not get it yet. Neither did the room. hold on to it, whose work recut that silk, and what did the Duke understand when he saw it? Keep that. Because now the great thing happened. The thing the whole evening turned on. The Duke of Corvenden walked out onto the floor. He walked the length of it. The full length. Past Miss Cordelia Vane, who had arranged herself so carefully, and who lifted her chin as he came near, certain that this was her moment. He walked past her, past the row of hopeful girls near the dancing, past the matrons, past Fanshawe, who had said the thing about grey wool, and who now watched with his mouth slightly open. He walked all the way to the wall, to the chaperones' bench, to the furniture. And he stopped in front of Beatrice Hartley. She did not understand at first that he had stopped for her. Why would she? Women in grey wool are not stopped for. She thought he must want the woman beside her, or that he was passing to a door. She kept still and let him pass. He did not pass. He bowed. To her, a duke, bowing, in front of the whole county, to a poor aunt in a made-over grey-day dress. "Madam," he said, "will you do me the honour of this dance? I want you to imagine the silence." It was not a small silence. It came down over the whole room like a cloth over a cage. The music was still playing, but under the music there was no other sound. 40 people, 50, had stopped breathing at the same moment. Miss Vane's careful face had come apart. Fanshawe had gone the colour of chalk. Every mother in the room was doing the same frantic arithmetic and getting no answer that made sense. 2 full minutes. That is how long the county held its breath. 2 minutes is a very long time to hold a breath. Stand somewhere quiet and count it out, and you will see. And Beatrice looked up at him, at this tired, dusty, powerful man bent toward her with his hand out, and every instinct she had, 9 years of instinct, told her it was a mistake, or a cruelty, or a joke. Grey wool does not get asked. She had just been told so, out loud, an hour before. But his face was not cruel, and it was not joking. It was, if anything, uncertain, as though he too were doing something he did not quite understand and could not stop doing. She could have refused. Part of her wanted to refuse and stay safe behind the wall where the world had put her. She put her hand in his instead, and the Duke of Corvenden led a woman in grey wool out onto the floor, past every silk gown in the county, and he danced with her. They danced. And it was strange, and it was quiet, and the county watched every step. He was not a graceful man that night, tired as he was, but he was careful with her, and she found to her own surprise that her feet remembered. That the body does not forget the figures of a dance, even after a very long time. "You dance well," he said. "I have not danced," she said, "in 11 years. 11 years. Say that number to yourself. 11 years since a man had held out his hand to her. She said it plainly, without self-pity, the way she said everything. But it landed. You could see it land on him. He looked at the black ribbon at her throat. "You are in mourning," he said. "For my brother. 9 years. He gave me his 3 daughters and this ribbon, and not much else." She nodded toward the floor, where Charlotte had stopped dancing and stood frozen, watching her aunt in the Duke's arms, with an expression Beatrice could not read from there. "The eldest is being presented tonight." "In rose silk," the Duke said. "In rose silk," Beatrice agreed. And he looked at her for a moment, a long, strange, weighing look, as though he were about to say something, and then he did not say it. He kept it. Whatever it was, he folded it away and kept it, and only asked her about the girls and the county and the frost that was coming. Because outside, that night, the first frost of the year was settling on the fields. The summer was over. Something was ending and something was beginning, and neither of them said so, but the cold at the windows said it for them. The dance ended. He returned her to the wall. He bowed again, and thanked her, and left her there among the astonished mothers. And the whole room came slowly back to life around her, buzzing now, every head bent to every other head, 100 whispered questions and no answers. What none of them knew, what Beatrice herself did not know, was that the question had already been asked and answered, not out loud. In the Duke's head, an hour before, when he looked at a girl's gown and understood something no one else in the room could understand. That was the real beginning. The dance was only the visible part. Here is what the dance did to the county. It turned it inside out overnight. By morning, the story was in every parlour in Nether Harding. The Duke of Corvenden had crossed the whole floor to dance with the Hartley aunt, and the county, which the evening before had seen a poor woman in grey wool and looked straight through her, now sat up and looked again. When a duke notices a woman, everyone must suddenly ask what he saw. They had missed something. They must have missed something. What was it? Fanshawe's clever remark, which had got a laugh at the ball, now sat very badly on him. One does not ask grey wool to dance. Well, one had. The most important one had. His words curdled and turned, and people remembered them, and remembered he had said them, and it did him no good at all. A remark is only clever until the great man disagrees with it. Then it is just cruelty, exposed, but not everyone was pleased. I must tell you about Charlotte. Charlotte should have been happy. Her family had been noticed. But Charlotte was 18, and 18 does not always think kindly. Charlotte had wanted the ball to be about her presentation, her rose silk, her chances, and instead the whole county was talking about her aunt, her plain, poor 41-year-old aunt in grey wool. Charlotte was afraid, in a way she was ashamed of and could not stop, that her aunt's strangeness would spoil everything, that the young men would look at the odd Hartley family, with the aunt the Duke danced with for reasons nobody could name, and step back. She did not say this to Beatrice. But Beatrice, who read her girls the way the Duke read evidence, saw it in her, and it hurt. Here was the sting inside the sacrifice. She had cut up her last silk for this girl, and the girl now half wished she had stayed home. Beatrice said nothing. She was practiced at saying nothing. She only wore it, one more weight. Quietly, she told herself the dance meant nothing, a tired man, a whim, a kindness. She locked it in the drawer with the other things she did not let herself hope for. It was safer there. It would come to nothing, and she would be ready for it to come to nothing, and so it could not hurt her. She was wrong. But you cannot blame her for the discipline. It had kept her alive for 9 years. 3 days later, it came to something. She was in the kitchen at Rose Cottage, in an apron, with flour on her hands, doing the accounts in her head while she worked, when Sophia ran in and said a man was at the gate on a horse. A plain man on a plain horse, Sophia said. Not grand. Beatrice went out wiping her hands, expecting the coal merchant, or worse, a man from the loan company come early about Michaelmas, and her stomach turned over at the thought. It was the Duke of Corvenden. He had ridden over alone, in a plain riding coat, with no servant and no ceremony and no announcement. He looked, in daylight, at Rose Cottage, at the mended thatch, at the small cold windows, at the girls washing on the line, patched and clean, at the woman in the doorway with flour on her hands and an apron over her grey wool. He did not seem to find any of it beneath him. That was the strange thing. He looked at it the way he looked at everything, carefully reading it. And what he read in that small, poor, immaculate house was a whole story of how 4 people had been kept alive and warm and decent on £110 a year. And he understood, standing at that gate, exactly what kind of work that was. She asked him in, because there was nothing else to do. She gave him the good chair, the only good chair. She gave him tea in the cup that matched. And the girls stared at him from the stairs until she sent them out. He talked easily. He asked about the household, and she answered plainly, because she did not know how to do otherwise. He saw her account book open on the table, and he looked at it, and she let him, and he saw the columns, penny by penny, 9 years of them, and he said nothing, but she saw him understand. And here is where Beatrice Hartley did the thing that finished him. Though she did not know it was finishing him, she thought she was protecting herself. Because a duke does not ride to a poor cottage twice in 3 days for nothing. Even Beatrice, with the drawer locked tight, could feel the something in the room, and a woman with 3 girls to place, and a debt due at Michaelmas, and a reputation that was all she had, cannot afford a something she does not understand. It could ruin Charlotte. It could ruin them all if the county decided the aunt was making a fool of herself over a duke who meant nothing by it. So she did not melt. Another woman might have melted, might have blushed and hoped and let the moment be sweet. Beatrice put her cup down, and she looked at him straight across her own kitchen table, and she asked him plainly, "And what, your grace, could your intentions possibly be?" Not coy, not fishing, plain as a bill of accounts. A tired, practical woman with 3 girls to place, asking a rich man in her own kitchen to state his business, because she could not afford to guess. It was the least romantic sentence a man had put to him, and it went through Julian Hale like a key going into the one lock it was cut for. Because here, at last, was a person not pursuing him, not counting his acres, not arranging her face, a person looking at him straight and asking him to account for himself, the way he spent all his days asking other people to account for themselves. He had wanted, his whole hunted life, to be read correctly by one honest reader, and here she sat, with flour on her hands, reading him. He did not have an answer ready. That was the truth of it. He opened his mouth, and for the first time in that county in 20 years, the Duke of Corvenden did not have the next thing to say. And into that silence, into that kitchen, with the tea going cold, and the girls whispering on the stairs, and the black ribbon at her throat, came the sound of a second horse at the gate, and a second knock, and Sophia's voice calling that another gentleman had come to call on Aunt Beatrice. 2 men now at the gate of Rose Cottage, and a debt coming due at Michaelmas that neither of them yet knew about. Beatrice Hartley stood up, in her apron, between the Duke she could not afford to hope for and whatever waited at the door, and she did not yet know that the second knock would change everything. The second horseman was not another Duke. It was Mr. Silas Pruitt. He was a grazier from over the hill. A widower, 6 miles of good pasture, and a house with 11 rooms standing empty in most of them. A steady man, a kind one, in the dull way that kindness sometimes comes. He stood in her doorway with his hat held in both his hands, and when he saw the Duke of Corvenden sitting at Beatrice's kitchen table, he went the colour of cold tallow. "Your Grace," he said, and he bowed far too low. Julian Hale rose. He was a magistrate. He knew when a scene wanted a man to leave it. He thanked Beatrice for the tea. He told her he would call again, and he went out past the grazier and mounted his horse and rode the 6 miles home, with the question she had asked him still unanswered in his chest. Pruitt sat down where the Duke had sat. He would not look at the cup. He turned his hat. "Miss Hartley," he said, "I'll not dress it up. I'm no hand at that." And he made his offer. Plain, decent. He knew about the debt, he said. Everyone from here to Dorchester knew a little of it. £285 owed to the Wessex and Dorset Loan Company, due at Michaelmas, on the cottage that was still, for now, in her name. Marry him, he said, and it was gone. Paid off, forgotten. Charlotte could be married from a good house. Emily brought out proper. Sophia have a room that faced the sun, for her chest. All 3 girls placed and safe, and Beatrice a mistress of a warm kitchen instead of a cold one. He asked for nothing but a steady wife. He would be no trouble to her. He said that last part looking at the floor, and it was the truest thing in it. Beatrice looked at this good, dull, generous man, and she felt the whole weight of 9 years lean toward the word yes, because he was safe, and safe was the only thing she had ever been able to afford. She asked him for a little time. He said, take all she wanted. He put his hat back on, and he went. And that night she sat with the account book open on the table and did not write in it. 3 days after, the Duke's difficulty came to her door. He rode over in a plain coat, as he had before, without ceremony. He did not speak of intentions. He brought her a trouble instead, which she understood at once was a kind of trust. His young cousin, Miss Georgiana Hale, was being courted by a Captain Merrow. A charming man. Good coat, good horse, good gloves. The Duke could not fault him on a single point of fact, and yet, he said, something in me will not sit still about it, and I have learned to mind that feeling, only I cannot name it. You have an eye, Miss Hartley. I have watched you use it. Will you look at him for me? She said she would. Captain Merrow came to the County Assembly that Thursday. Beatrice took her place at the wall in her grey wool, where a woman of 41 was expected to sit, and she watched him the way she watched a bill of accounts, and she read him in under a minute. Because Beatrice Hartley had spent 3 candlelit nights recutting a 15-year-old rose silk into something modern for her niece. She knew, in her fingers, what recutting looked like. And Captain Merrow was recut all over. His coat had been turned. She could see the ghost of the old seam riding a half-inch off true, where good cloth had been taken apart and made up again to look new. His gloves were the last year's cut, whitened. The lace at his wrist was mended, and mended by a clever hand, but mended. His boot heels had been built up. His watch chain was too bright for the watch. Here was a man living on the appearance of means, a man who had recut his whole self to look like money, exactly as she had recut a gown to look like a fortune Charlotte did not have. She, who had done it honestly, could see the dishonest doing of it plain as print. She went to the Duke, and she laid it out. The seam, the gloves, the lace, the heels. She spoke quietly, and she pointed to nothing, so that no one watching would know a thing was passing between them. Their gloved hands rested near on the edge of the table where he had set down his cards, near and not touching. And the Duke listened to her the way he listened to sworn evidence. He is spending, she said, what he has not got, and he means to marry it back. That was the moment she chose to act. She could have stopped at telling him. A woman of her station, warning a duke about his own family, was already a step above where she was allowed to stand. But she did not stop. She wrote to the captain's former regiment. She wrote to a draper in Bath, whose bill she guessed lay unpaid. And she carried what came back to the Duke herself, and put her whole respectability behind believing it. Captain Merrow was gone from the county inside the fortnight. Miss Georgiana was saved from him, and never knew how near she had come. And the Duke of Corvenden had learned that the woman in grey wool could read what no one else in 3 counties had been able to read. After that, he rode to Rose Cottage often. The county noticed. Of course it noticed. A duke does not ride 6 miles to a cottage on £110 a year without every window in the district counting his passings. He learned that she took her coffee without sugar. He remembered it, and he asked for his the same way, which was a small foolish thing, and she let herself be warmed by it for exactly 1 evening and no more. He found the gate latch hanging loose one wet morning, and he mended it himself, in the rain, with a bit of wire from his own pocket, while she stood in the doorway and told him a duke had no business mending gates, and he told her a magistrate had no business doing half of what he did, and did it anyway. She disciplined her hope the way she disciplined the household. To the shilling, she let herself feel a thing, and then she put it away in the locked drawer of her mind, where she kept the figure of £285, and she counted the days to Michaelmas. Because hope was the one luxury she had never once allowed herself, and she was too old, she told herself, and too tired to start now. Then came the harvest dinner at Corvenden. She should not have gone. She knew it as the carriage came up the long drive, and the great house showed itself, lit in every window, 40 of the county already inside. But Charlotte was invited, and Charlotte's prospects wanted the airing, and so Beatrice put on the grey wool and the black ribbon and went to sit among the chaperones in a house the size of a village. The Dowager Duchess of Corvenden received her with a smile like a closed door, and beside the Dowager stood Miss Cordelia Vane. Miss Vane was young and rich, and the match the Duke's mother had chosen for him. She had a great fortune and a face that had never once wanted for anything, and she looked at Beatrice Hartley's grey wool and at the black ribbon at her throat, and she understood in one glance that this tired woman was the reason a duke had stopped answering his mother's letters about the wedding. Beatrice sat through the dinner. She watched the Duke at the head of his own table, weary from the bench, and she took out the letter she had written and not sent, which she carried folded against her stays. She had written it 3 nights before. It released him. It said in careful words that a woman of her situation could only be a weight upon a dukedom, and that she wished him every good thing, and that he must not call again. She had written it for his sake, she told herself, and she had not been able to make her hand carry it to the fire or to the post. So she carried it, instead, folded and unsent, against her heart. She never sent it. Miss Vane sent something else. It happened after the cloth was drawn, when the county was standing about the great drawing-room in its knots and clusters. Miss Vane's voice was not loud. It did not need to be. It was pitched exactly to carry. "How brave of Miss Hartley," she said, "to come among us, and with such a debt hanging over her little house." The room did not stop all at once. It stopped in a spreading ring, the way a pond stops when a stone goes in. £285, I am told, said Miss Vane, to the Wessex and Dorset Loan Company. Due at Michaelmas. On a cottage she cannot keep. She turned her lovely face to Beatrice, all soft concern. One does wonder what a woman in such straits might be hunting, when she puts her pretty nieces before a duke and sits so patiently at his family's table. And there was Merrow's poison in it too. He was gone, but he had left his story behind him on his way out the door, the story of the interfering aunt who had ruined an honest man's suit, and Miss Vane had gathered it up and sharpened it. Fortune hunter. The word was never said. It did not need to be. It stood in the room in its grey wool for everyone to see. 40 of the county looked at Beatrice Hartley. She did not cry. She had not cried when Fanshawe called her grey wool at the ball, and she did not cry now. She stood up. She was 41 years old, and she had kept 4 people alive on £110 a year for 9 years. And she had done it without once being pitied to her face, and she would not begin here. She looked for the Duke. He was not in the room. He had been called away an hour since to the far end of the house on the county's business, as he always was. So there was no one to speak for her. There never had been. There was only herself. Miss Vane has her figures very exact, Beatrice said. Her voice was level as a rule. She is right. I owe the money. I have owed it a long time. And I will settle it, one way or another, as I have settled everything else that has come to my door. She reached up and she straightened the black ribbon at her throat, the way she always did. And she gathered Charlotte, who had gone white as her gloves, and she took her leave of the Dowager Duchess with a curtsy that gave the woman not one thing to complain of, and she went out of that great house with her back straight and her chin level and her heart in pieces. In the carriage Charlotte wept and begged to know if it was true, and Beatrice held the girl's hand and told her the truth, all of it, at last. The gown, the 15 years, the debt, the 3 candlelit nights. Charlotte understood, finally, what the rose silk on her shoulders had cost, and she wept harder, and Beatrice let her, and did not weep herself. That night Beatrice made her decision. She would marry Silas Pruitt. She would take the safe, warm, dull thing, and the debt would be gone, and the girls would be placed. And the county could say what it liked of a grazier's wife over the hill. She would not let the Duke ruin himself, defending a woman the county had named a fortune hunter. She would refuse him if he came. She would protect Charlotte's untouched prospects by removing the stain of herself. The Duke did not come the next day, nor the day after. She told herself it was answer enough. She began to pack. She folded the girls' small hopes into Pruitt's steadiness, dress by dress, book by book. And she did not know that the Duke of Corvenden had not come because the Duke of Corvenden was working. He was working at the magistrates' bench. And he was working first on his mother. The scene the county never saw was a quiet one. A cold morning room at Corvenden, the Dowager Duchess in her chair, and her son standing at the window with his back to her. "You will explain this madness to me," the Dowager said. "A woman of 41, in grey wool, in debt. You will explain what you imagine you see in her, that you would set the whole county talking and throw over Miss Vane and every sensible arrangement I have made." Julian Hale turned round. "You think I looked at a plain woman," he said, "and saw a hidden beauty. You think I was charmed. You have it wrong, mother. All of it. I did not see through her plainness to anything at all. I saw a gown." The Dowager stared. "At the ball," he said. "I came in late off the quarter sessions, half dead, wanting nothing but to go home. And I saw a girl being presented in rose silk. And I stopped. Because I know silk, mother, that was Spittlefield's work, the old fine kind, from before the trade came apart. 15 years out of the loom if it was a day. And it had been taken apart and recut, seam by seam, into this year's fashion, by a hand so fine I could not find the joins. Do you understand what that is? It is a made-over dress," said his mother. "It is a confession," he said. "Somebody in that family owned one good silk, one, and they cut it off their own back and sat up nights making it beautiful for a girl who was not them, so that she could have a chance they had given up on for themselves. That gown was an act of love with a needle, and I read evidence for my living, mother. I have read men's whole secret hearts off a turned cuff and a mended glove. I was the one man in that room able to read what that gown was saying. So I asked who had done it, and they pointed me to a woman in grey wool at the chaperones' wall, and I crossed the floor to her. Not despite what she had given up. Because of it, the Dowager Duchess said nothing for a long moment, and now the county calls her a fortune hunter, her son went on, quiet and terrible. The one woman in Dorset who has spent her whole self giving fortune away. They have read her exactly backward. And I am a magistrate. I do not let evidence be read backward. Not in my court. Not in my county. Not about her. Then the Duke of Corvenden went to work in earnest. He had noticed a thing, over the months, sitting at the bench. The Wessex and Dorset Loan Company came before him too often. Small holders. Cottagers, widows, always a little more owed than seemed right, always due on a hard quarter day, always the interest run up past what any honest ledger would show. He had let it trouble him and done nothing, the way a busy man lets a thing trouble him. Now he had a reason to stop letting it. He sent for the company's books. As a working magistrate of 3 counties he had the power to, and he used it. He sat up with those books the way Beatrice sat up with her account book, penny by penny, night after night. And what he found in writing. The quarter sessions sat on the Thursday before Michaelmas. The county came, as it always came, to watch its betters do its business. Fanshawe came. Miss Vane came, on the Dowager's arm. Half the harvest dinner crowd came, scenting something. The Duke of Corvenden took the chair. He called the matter of the Wessex and Dorset Loan Company. and before the whole county he laid it open. The false accounting. The interest charged above the lawful rate, on holding after holding, cottage after cottage, dressed up in figures meant to fool people who could not check them. He named the sums. He named the families. And then he named one cottage in particular, Rose Cottage, in the parish of Nether Harding. £285 claimed, of which, he showed, in the company's own hand, near half was unlawful interest that had never been owed at all. He struck the debt down from the chair. He declared the true sum settled out of the fines levied on the company for its fraud. And he ordered the cottage clear, the mortgage discharged, the deed to Rose Cottage registered free and unencumbered in the name of Miss Beatrice Hartley. And no other. The institution that had hung over her 9 years was wound up by lawful authority in an afternoon. Her home was not bought for her like a bauble. It was a wrong put right in open court, on the record, forever, and Beatrice knew none of it. Because Beatrice was at home packing, they came for her in the Duke's own carriage. Charlotte, flushed and breathless, would not tell her why, only that she must come now, to the assembly rooms and wear the grey wool, yes, the grey wool. It must be the grey wool. And Beatrice, too worn to fight the girl, put on the grey wool and the black ribbon one more time and let herself be carried the 6 miles in. The assembly rooms were full. The same room, the same 40 of the county and more. The same floor where, weeks before, a duke had crossed to a woman in grey wool, while 2 full minutes of silence sat in every chest. He was standing at the head of the room when she came in, and when he saw her, he began, a second time, to cross the floor. The whole length of it, past Miss Vane, past the matrons, past Fanshawe, the same walk, the same witnesses. And the county fell silent again, the way it had fallen silent the first time, because it knew it was watching the same thing happen twice, and it still did not understand what the thing was. He stopped first, though, not at Beatrice. He stopped at Mr. Reginald Fanshawe. "Mr. Fanshawe," he said, pleasant and dry, so the room could hear. "You said at the ball that one does not ask grey wool to dance. I have thought about your remark a good deal." He let it sit. "You mistook the wrapping for the woman. I would not repeat the error, in your place. It is expensive." Fanshawe opened his mouth and found nothing in it, and shut it again. The Duke turned to Miss Cordelia Vane. "Miss Vane, I owe you thanks. Real thanks," coldly meant. "You stood up before the county and told me exactly whom I wished to marry. You meant to show me a debt. You showed me instead the only woman in this county who has never once, in her life, tried to profit by me. You could not have done me a greater service if you had spent your whole fortune on it." He bowed to her, correct to the inch. It was the worst thing he could have done, and every soul in the room knew it. Then he came to his mother, and he stopped, and he held out his arm. The Dowager Duchess of Corvenden looked at her son. She looked, a long moment, at the woman in grey wool across the room. And then, before the whole county, the Dowager Duchess took her son's arm. And that, more than anything he had said, told the county which way the world had turned. He walked his mother the last of the way, and he stopped in front of Beatrice Hartley, at the head of the room, in the very place the county kept for its highest and its best. The place no one had ever thought to give a woman in grey wool on £110 a year. "Miss Hartley," he said, "the debt on Rose Cottage was unlawful. It is struck down and gone. The deed is registered this afternoon in your name, and in no one's else. Forever you owe nothing to any man, and you never truly did." He paused. "I did not do it to buy you. A thing bought is not worth having. I did it because it was a wrong, and I mend wrongs. That is the whole of my trade." Then the Duke of Corvenden, before 40 of the county and more, asked Beatrice Hartley to marry him, not despite what she had given up. He said it out loud, so there could be no mistake in any account of it afterward. Because of what she had given up. Because a woman who would cut the last good silk off her own back for a girl who was not her daughter was the only kind of woman he had ever wished to stand beside. The room did not breathe. Beatrice looked at him, 11 years since she had danced, before he asked her. 9 years in mourning. 41 years of never once letting herself hope for a thing she could not afford. And here it was, offered in open court, paid for and proved. She reached up and she touched the black ribbon at her throat. Her brother's ribbon. Kept 9 years. "Some weeks ago, Your Grace," she said, and her voice was steady, and it carried. "You sat in my kitchen, and I asked you what your intentions could possibly be. You could not answer me then. A breath. You have answered me now. Fully, before everyone." She let the smallest thing that was not quite a smile come to her mouth. "I find, after 11 years, that my intentions are the same as yours." And the woman in grey wool, who had been set at the chaperones' wall and told she was past being asked, was handed to the head of the room by a duke, while every soul who had enforced the rule stood and watched the rule give way. They were married before the leaves were fully down. A year on, Rose Cottage stands as it always stood, small and whitewashed, and hers, the deed in her name. Kept exactly as it is, because she would not have it made grand. It is let now to a widow of the parish for a fair rent, and the money goes into a fund for girls without dowries, which the Duchess of Corvenden administers herself penny by penny in an account book with a familiar hand. Charlotte is respectably married to a good man who knows precisely what her wedding silk once was and honours it. Emily is out, and clever, and in no hurry. Sophia laughs in the garden at Corvenden the whole day long, and her chest has not troubled her once through a warm winter in a room that faces the sun. The rose silk itself, worn to threads at last by Charlotte, was not thrown away. A length of it, the soundest part, was cut once more by Beatrice's own hand and made up into the christening gown of the county's next small hale. 15 years out of fashion, recut 3 times over, and worth more than anything new in 3 counties. Beatrice Hartley is the Duchess of Corvenden now, and she goes in colour at last. Deep blues, and a green like the pasture, in May. The grey wool is given to a woman who needs it more, and the black mourning ribbon, her brother's ribbon, worn 9 years at her throat, and through every hard hour of this whole story, is no longer at her throat. It is folded, honoured, in a drawer she opens sometimes. Because grief kept too long is only another debt, and she has learned, late, to let a thing be paid and set down. Mr. Fanshawe declined his next invitation to Corvenden. He was not sent another. The Wessex and Dorset Loan Company was wound up by order of the court and troubles no cottager in Dorset now. And the county, which had read a woman by her dress and got her entirely wrong, learned the lesson too late for its own comfort. That you cannot know what a person is worth by what they are wearing. You can only know it by what they gave up, and to whom, and in the dark, when no one was meant to see. If you have ever been judged by your dress instead of your heart, then you already knew, before I told you, exactly what that gown was saying. Tell me, in the comments, the name of your town or city. I like to know where in the world this story found you tonight.